Welcome to the new session. Today we are starting Module 4. Module 4 includes filtration, type of filters, theory of filtration, then design of rapid and slow sand filter, etc. Now, filtration. What do you mean by filtration? In filtration, water is passed through a filter media. Is it? The water is passed through a filter media. The media is nothing but sand, and then pebbles or metals are used as the supporting media. And why do we need this media? It is to remove the particulate matter which is not previously removed by sedimentation. The turbidity and colloidal matter of non-settlable type and biological impurities such as algae, microorganisms are removed in filtration. So in the earlier classes, we were discussing sedimentation and removal of settlable particles either by gravity or by colloidal or by coagulation and sedimentation, is it? Now we know that the colloidal particles which is non-settlable, a certain portion of these colloidal particles are made into flocks or which is forced to settle by forming flocks using coagulants. But still the very minute particles which is mostly of negatively charged particles will not settle even in the sedimentation process. And again, we know it is the water contains algae, microorganisms, etc., which is of biological in nature, and these particles also we have to remove. Now, the bacterial content of water is considerably reduced due to the presence of an active zoological layer on the top of the filtering material. So that is the importance of filtration. That means usually the filtration process is of basically biological in nature. Physical processes are there, but basically it is of biological in nature. Now we will discuss the theory of filtration. The following actions are taking place in filtration process. There are four processes. First one is mechanical straining. Second one is sedimentation. Third one is biological action. And fourth is electrolytic action. We will discuss in detail. First one, the mechanical straining. This is the simplest action taking place during filtration. The suspended particles are usually larger than the pore space of the filter media and hence they are arrested and removed. When the water passes through the filter media, the major removal takes place in the upper layers of few centimeters of the filter media. These arrested particles form a mat and help in further straining. So that means here what we were discussing, it is the mechanical straining. Mechanical straining we know it is what is that? It is uh, by physical action. There is a filter, just like a mat filter. We are pouring water. When you pour water through that mat filter, the particles larger size will settle or removed in the strainer, and the remaining water or the liquid will fall down, is it? Here also the simplest action is the nothing but the mechanical straining. Here what is that mat or the strainer? That is nothing but the sand bed. The sand bed. So when the water is passing through the sand bed, the particles which is of larger than the pore space of the filter media will be arrested there and removed. And usually we know it is the if you can see that this is a, just like a, if there is a filter bed, there is a filter bed, so then this filter bed is of say rectangular or rectangular in shape, rectangular in shape. So then the sand bed, it is filled there in that container or in that tank, and the water is passing through the media. So the media is we know it is nothing but the sand. So when the water is passing through the sand bed, these particles are removed, which is larger of size than the pore space. That is the simple method of straining, is it? Now here it is again mentioned that the major removal takes place in the upper layers of the few centimeters of the filter media. When the top layer is already blocked, or already when the pore space are filled with the larger particles, then further removal will not take place in the upper layer, is it? So that is why it is the mechanical straining usually takes place in the upper layers only. Now second process is nothing but sedimentation. So how the sedimentation will take place here? In mechanical straining, the larger impurities than the void space only are arrested, and the finer particles are arrested in the by the sedimentation within the filter media. How it is taking place? So we know that when the tank is filled with sand, when the container is filled with the sand, we know that there is pore space is there within the, that means the sand is having void space there, and this void space will act a tube settler. So tube settler means a small thin long space, is it? So the particles, when it is passed through this narrow space, as the velocity is very small, the velocity of the flow within the sand bed is very small. The smaller particles, as the settling velocity is very low, they will settle there within the pore space. And the sand bed is of, usually it is of 1 meter depth, and within these 1 meter depth there are large number of tube settlers of small length is there. Because of that, the smaller particles are tend to settle there, since the settling velocity and the flow velocity is almost of same, or it is less. Now this process will take place across the total depth of the sand bed. That is almost zero point 0.9 to 1 meter depth is the usual depth of this sand bed in filters. Now that is the, and again here we know that it is the sedimentation, it is how it is taking place. Either it may be the discrete particle settling, or it may be the flocculant settling, since we know that it is already coagulated, is it? The water is already coagulated and it is coming out. And even if it is not coagulated, because the settling velocity is less and the flow velocity is less, it is tend to settle within that pore space. Now coming to the next process, that is the interception. The particles pass close enough to grains of filter media to touch and held. That is interception. Interception, we know that it is very closely, it is passing through the grains of the filter media when it is coming in touch with the surface of the media, it is getting held there, is it? So that is interception. Now the next one is the biological action. When the water is allowed to pass through the sand bed, a film of zoological jelly is formed around the sand grains. The bacteria are caught in these voids. The zoological film helps to develop bacterial colonies. The bacteria consume the organic impurities for their survival, and thus the harmful organic matter are removed to harmless compounds by biological action. Also, the biological growth on the media will reduce the pore volume and hence the removal of particles by straining or adsorption. When the water is passed through the sand filter, the upper layers of sand grain become coated with reddish brown sticky deposit of partially decomposed matter together with iron, manganese, aluminum and silica. After some time, these after some time there exists a layer of algae, bacteria and protozoa, and this film is known as smudge decay, which act as an extremely fine meshed straining mat. So that is the uh, important process taking place in the filtration. Filtration. So here what is there? Here it was explaining that in the filter bed, in the filter bed, these sand beds, when the water is passed through the sand bed, we know the water contains biological impurities such as algae or microorganisms. Is it? Microorganisms are there, and these microorganisms, when it is caught, when it is uh, collected within the within this media, a sticky or reddish brown sticky deposit is formed over the sand grain. That is because of the biological action. It's actually what is that? It is the discharge of the microorganisms. So when it is discharged, it is coated over the sun grains, and during the process, after 1 or 2 days, we can found that because of the reddish brown sticky deposit on the sand media, we found that there is a thin layer is formed on the top of the sand media. On the top of the sand media, that means when the reddish brown sticky deposit is increased or deposited over the sand bed, every day it is depositing, and as a result it becomes a thin layer and it is forming over the sand media, the top of the sand media. And now this thin layer, it consists of algae, sometimes bacteria, sometimes the dead cells of the bacteria. And when these bacteria is forming there and it is growing there, it is multiplying there, and colonies of bacteria is forming. And how these bacteria is growing there? It is by consuming the food, that is the organic particles present in the water, or the algae which is present in the water is consumed by this microorganism and it is growing there. This small layer, it acts as a very fine meshed straining mat. When it is forming, this layer is known as smudge decay, and it is an extremely fine meshed straining mat. So it acts as a mat, and further straining process is taking place through these mat. That means very fine particles itself, it is strained or it is collected there, and removed from the water. That is the important process